just sitting around and schmooze before Mincha. Those of you who have been following my new little Facebook videos, that's, by the way, Ben's work, not mine. I can't take any credit for it. Well, we'll know that one that was posted last week, or during the past week, about this week's Torah reading, I quoted Emerson. I gave you just one line from a quote that he presented in his definition of success. But here is the full quote. He said, "To laugh often and much, to win the respect of intelligent people and the affection of children, to earn the appreciation of honest critics and endure the betrayal of false friends, to appreciate beauty, to find the best in others, to leave the world a bit better, whether by a healthy child, a garden patch, or a redeemed social condition. To know even one life has breathed easier because you have lived. This is to have succeeded." Good words, I'm sure you'll agree. We can even say that they are the words by which we should be living. So in light of these words, I was wondering, what, if anything, does Judaism, or this week's Torah reading, say about success? This morning, we began the Torah reading with what might be called by some as the Joseph narrative. The latter part of the book of Genesis, which deals with the story of Jacob's favorite son, Joseph. Not only was Joseph what we call a dreamer, but he was also an interpreter of dreams, his own as well as those of others. And like Pharaoh's chief baker, Elizabeth explained in her overview, and the chief cupbearer with whom he was later imprisoned, not to mention the dreams of Pharaoh himself that he successfully was able to interpret. Now, we're probably familiar with Joseph's most famous dream, the ones where he seems to see himself as a sheaf with other sheaves symbolizing his brothers bowing down to him. When he sees himself as the brightest star in the sky, and the sun and the moon and the 11 other stars bowing down to him. Now, these dreams certainly got Joseph into a lot of trouble. The brothers, the Torah says, they hated him, and they couldn't speak nicely about him. Okay? And what happened? What did they do? They threw him in a pit, and they sold him into slavery as the option of not killing him. And of course, all of this begs the question, why would Joseph even have been so silly to tell his brothers about these dreams in the first place? Well, that's a sermon for a different time. But leaving that question aside, is there anything inherently wrong with Joseph's dreams? What's wrong with dreaming about and aspiring to become successful? And what's wrong with doing what you need to do to make those dreams a reality? And the answer, of course, is nothing, so long as you don't harm, offend others along the way. But if we're talking about dreaming and aspiring to become successful, shouldn't we at least know what the definition of success is, so that we are better able to make our dreams a reality? Think about it. We all dream. We all dream of success. We all want to succeed in life. Not only ourselves, but those close to us as well. But again, how do we define success? And one answer is that it could differ depending on the person. For example, we don't all dream or have dreams of grandeur like Joseph. But again, more to the point, how does Judaism define that term success? And we can answer that question in a number of ways, but one such way that I want to share with you is by looking at the term in light of the upcoming Hanukkah holiday. Yeah, Hanukkah's around the corner. For many of us, Hanukkah has no real religious significance. To some, it's merely sort of a Jewish type of holidays of another religion. It's another occasion to some to get presents. And so we celebrate just like our non-Jewish members do. If they get presents under their trees, we should get presents too as we light the Hanukkah candles. And you know that that's not the way I feel because I've spoken about it many times. But another way of looking at this in terms of that word success is that Hanukkah is our opportunity to say, hey, I'm Canadian. I've made it. I'm successful. My dreams have come true in this great country. And to prove my success and the success that I am, I want to give and receive presents just like everybody else. And thus we have achieved a measure of success as Canadians and as a people. But is that how we should really measure our success? By the size or the amount of presents that we get? Think about it as we go back to the Torah for a minute. The Torah tells us that when Joseph was sold into slavery by his brothers, he was bought by Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's chief advisors. And soon enough, because of his abilities, as Elizabeth said this morning, he became the head of Potiphar's household. Joseph was so successful that he had the run of the house. Joseph was a success. His dreams had come true because he was, in the essence, the chief slave. But was that what Joseph's dreams were all about? Is that our definition of success today? The sheaves and the stars represented the other slaves that would end up bowing down to him, not just his brothers. And the answer, of course, is no. That was not what he was dreaming about. This wasn't Joseph's dream. It wasn't his goal. It wasn't his aspiration. But although Joseph dreamed of more, he was nevertheless successful at what became his lot in life at that point in his life. And that's what a lot of people forget. A lot of people are often successful at that moment in time. Whether he was chief of Potiphar's household or as the head prisoner when he was thrown in jail based on false accusations of Mrs. Potiphar was irrelevant. In other words, Joseph's success wasn't because he accumulated any wealth or because he gave out gifts to the members of the staff. No, Joseph's success came about for two reasons. First, because he had faith that God would guide his endeavors and enable him to succeed. And second, because of the way Joseph behaved with and treated other people, especially those who were lower than him. And that led others to want to be around him, to respect him, and to listen to him. He was universally admired for his skills in managing a household and because of the values that he brought to the task. So perhaps that is how we should view and define success today as well. And again, we can look to the Hanukkah story as a beautiful guide. Hanukkah is about the success of the Maccabees, the victory of the few over the many, v'rabim biyad ma'atim, as we recite. And most importantly, it's about the success and the triumph of Jewish values. Hanukkah is not merely a Jewish Christmas. Rather, it is a time to reflect on our own Jewish values and the fact that we have successfully kept them for thousands of years. And one way we do so is by remembering that many years ago, a small group of Jews fought to preserve those values rather than take the easy way out and assimilate. In other words, we define our success not based on our material wealth or status, but by our adherence to the Jewish values and the oral Torah. Because what a lot of people don't realize, that it was the story of Hanukkah that actually connected and kept us tied to the oral Torah, but that's for a different shiur. Rabbi Mitch Wahlberg tells this story, which I think illustrates the point beautifully. He says, "This lesson I learned when I was a little kid. I learned the lesson at Macy's. One of the most formative experiences of my youth, I couldn't have been more than 8 or 9 years old, was one day when my brothers took me with them shopping at Macy's in New York City." He goes on to say, the 3 of us were wearing yarmulkes, because we came from a frum family. We wore yarmulkes. And that was not as common as a sight as it is today in New York City. One of my brothers bought a tie. It was a cheap shmata. And when we were paying, the salesman turned to us and said, "I see you have a yarmulke on your head." And the salesman said to them, "I too have a yarmulke, but I don't keep it on my head. I keep it in a place that's much more important." And what did he do? He opened the cash register, and there he took out the yarmulke. And he said to the children, "I'm dealing with other people's money all day, every day. And that yarmulke reminds me to behave myself." That yarmulke, representing our Judaism, must do the same for you always. Wouldn't you just say for a moment that this Macy's salesman was successful? I would. He was a salesman. He was in the shmata department. Do you think he made much money? Probably not. But that didn't stop him from treating his customers honestly and fairly, and keeping his Jewish values with him even at work. As the Talmud says, when asked how to identify a person as being Jewish, the Talmud teaches us they are modest, compassionate, honest, and perform acts of loving kindness, of chesed. That is the definition, my friends, of success that we should remember not only at Hanukkah, but all the time. So having said that, let's just return for a moment to the Joseph story. As you know, his dream of his brothers bowing down to him did actually come true. And he becomes the vice pharaoh, the viceroy, whatever you want to call it, of Egypt. And his brothers came down to Egypt to buy food and were required to bow down to him. But our Torah describes Joseph's success not in the terms of his dreams coming true, and not in terms of his achieving prominence. Rather, the rabbis revered Joseph for another reason. And that was because he maintained his Jewish identity, his heritage, and yes, his Jewish values. And despite living in a foreign land, despite rising to the highest levels of power, and despite being totally assimilated and immersed into Egyptian society, and what's more, he passed those values onto his children. That is why Ephraim and Manasseh were elevated to the status of Shevet, of tribe. Why? Because they were the first grandchildren to be born in a Medina Zara, in a foreign land, and yet they adhered to their Judaism. To the rabbis, this was the ultimate definition and example of success, and that should be our definition of success as well today. So, let us continue to be dreamers, to dream about success for ourselves, for our children, and for all those around us. But let us also continue to understand, especially as we celebrate Hanukkah in just a few days, what the Jewish definition of success truly means. It doesn't mean how many possessions we acquire. It means living our lives in accordance with our Jewish values, and then passing those values on down to our children and our grandchildren. And may we all not only dream about, but may we all be granted the schus, the merit, to have a truly successful life. Shabbat Shalom. Thank you. We continue on page 5.